The tables turn. I stood in my garage, froze in my hand, gripping the folding chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. Through the crack in the door, I could hear them perfectly. My sister-in-law Sophia's voice dripped with contempt as she whispered to my husband Brandon in our dining room just feet away from where I had been preparing a feast for his entire family. "I can't believe you actually married the help." "Dad's right, you need to divorce her before there are kids and you're stuck forever." The words hit me like a physical blow, but it was Brandon's response that made my heart stop completely. "I'm working on it. My lawyer says we can get half her business too." The chair in my hand suddenly weighed nothing. Or maybe everything. 7 years, $143,000, 60-hour work weeks building Vance Gatherings from $5,000 and a dream into a business they now wanted to rip apart like carrion. And I was standing in my own garage eavesdropping on my execution. No tears, no screams, just ice flooding my veins where blood used to be. I picked up that chair, carved my face into the perfect hostess smile, and walked back into that dining room carrying their weapon like a gift. They had no idea what was coming. But before I show you exactly how I made them pay, if you're here for the moment when the doormat becomes the storm, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated by people who should have known better. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now let me take you back 3 months to where the cracks first appeared. I was 34 running Vance Gatherings, my event planning empire in downtown Chicago. My proof that I was more than the help they thought they'd married into their precious family. I'd built it from nothing. From $5,000 in savings and a studio apartment where I couldn't open the oven and the fridge at the same time. Every client, every contract, every dollar had my fingerprints on it. Not his, never his. I remember those early days so clearly. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning to hit the farmer's market selecting the perfect heirloom tomatoes and fresh herbs. I'd spend weekends catering birthday parties for $50 plus tips, smiling through the exhaustion, collecting business cards, building relationships, one perfect appetizer at a time. I worked out of my tiny apartment kitchen hauling equipment in my beat-up Honda Civic, arriving at venues 3 hours early to set up staying 2 hours late to break down. The first year I made $23,000, barely enough to survive in Chicago. My apartment was a studio in Logan Square with a bathroom so small you had to stand sideways to use the sink. I ate ramen and day-old bread from the bakery where I bought supplies. I had exactly 2 professional outfits that I rotated, washing them in the sink every other night. But I was happy. God, I was so happy, because it was mine. Every dollar I earned, every client I landed, every 5-star review, it all belonged to me. I was building something real with my own hands. By year 3, I had rented commercial kitchen space 3 times a week. By year 5, I had hired my first employee, a prep cook named Marcus, who was willing to work for minimum wage and leftover catered food. By year 6, I had a small storefront office and was booking corporate events. When I met Brandon, I was finally making enough to breathe, to save, to dream about what came next. Brandon Thorne walked into my life at a charity gala I was catering at the Four Seasons. It was a massive event, 300 guests, a menu I'd labored over for weeks. Seared scallops with lemon beurre blanc, herb-crusted beef tenderloin, roasted vegetable towers with goat cheese and balsamic reduction. Everything had to be perfect because this was the kind of event that could make or break a small business like mine. I was in the kitchen plating the final desserts when he walked in. Tall, handsome, wearing a tuxedo like he was born in it. He had this smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. "You're the chef?" he asked, looking genuinely impressed. "This is the best food I've had all year. And trust me, I go to a lot of these things." "I'm the owner, actually," I said, wiping chocolate ganache off my hands. "Chef, caterer, event planner, dishwasher. I wear a lot of hats." He laughed, and something in his laugh made my heart skip. "Entrepreneur. I like that. I'm Brandon Thorne." We talked for 20 minutes while I finished plating. He told me he was a lawyer recently made junior partner at Morrison & Associates, one of the top corporate law firms in Chicago. He asked about my business, seemed genuinely interested in how I'd built it. He stayed after the event ended, helped me load equipment into my van, got chocolate sauce on his expensive tuxedo shirt, and didn't seem to care. "Have dinner with me," he said as I locked up the van. "Not at a charity gala. Somewhere we can actually talk." I should have noticed the warning signs then. The way he mentioned his firm's name like it was a credential. The expensive watch that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. The casual assumption that I'd say yes. But I was tired and lonely and flattered that someone like him would want someone like me. Our first date was at Alinea, one of the most expensive restaurants in Chicago. Brandon ordered the chef's tasting menu without asking if I was comfortable with the price. 23 courses. The bill was over $800. I remember sitting there overwhelmed by the molecular gastronomy and the pretension thinking about how that money could have bought new equipment for my kitchen. But Brandon was charming. He asked about my childhood, my dreams, my fears. He told me about growing up in Winnetka, about his father's expectations, about feeling like he had to prove himself even though his family had money. He made me feel seen. Special. I let myself fall. The courtship was a whirlwind. Flowers delivered to my office. Surprise weekend trips to Door County and Milwaukee. Tickets to shows I'd mentioned wanting to see. He met my parents, a retired teacher and a postal worker living in a modest house in Des Plaines, and charmed them completely. My mother loved him. "Your father and I were so worried about you being alone working so hard," she whispered to me at Christmas. "Brandon is such a good man. He'll take care of you." Meeting his family was different. The Thorns lived in a mansion in Winnetka, one of those sprawling estates with a circular driveway and professionally landscaped grounds. I remember pulling up in my Honda, suddenly aware of the rust spots and the dent in the back bumper parking next to a Range Rover and a Mercedes. Brandon squeezed my hand as we walked to the door. "Don't worry, they're going to love you." They didn't. Arthur Thorne answered the door in a cardigan that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked at me the way you'd look at something unexpected and vaguely disappointing. "So you're the caterer," he said, not a question. "Brandon's told us about you." "Event planner," I corrected, trying to smile. "I own my own business." "How nice," he said in a tone that made it clear it wasn't nice at all. "Come in. Harriet's in the sunroom." Harriet Thorne was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, elegant in the way that comes from generational wealth and expensive maintenance, she air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming her smile sharp. "Eleanor Wright, Brandon's mentioned you a few times. You cook for a living. I run an event planning and catering business," I said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. "Vance Gatherings." "How entrepreneurial," she said, managing to make it sound like an insult. "We'll have to have you cater one of our parties sometime, though we usually use Laurent's. Do you know Laurent's? They're the preferred caterer for the North Shore." The dinner was excruciating. Sophia, Brandon's older sister, barely spoke to me, texting throughout the meal. When she did acknowledge me, it was with questions designed to highlight our different worlds. "Where did you go to college?" "Oh, community college and then UIC." "How practical." "What do your parents do?" "A teacher and a mailman." "How quaint." Brandon's younger brother, Leo, was the only one who seemed genuinely kind. He asked real questions about my business, complimented the wine I'd brought, even though I'm sure it was cheap compared to what they usually drank. He looked embarrassed by his family's behavior. Arthur dominated the conversation, talking about investments and mergers and people I'd never heard of. Harriet discussed her latest real estate sale, a $12 million property in Lake Forest. Sophia complained about her tech startup's Series B funding. I sat there smiling, nodding, feeling like an imposter at my own life's table. After dinner, I overheard Harriet and Sophia in the powder room. I'd gone to look for the bathroom and heard voices through the door. "She's completely wrong for him," Sophia said. "What is Brandon thinking?" "She's a caterer. Mother, a caterer." "He's rebelling," Harriet replied. "Going through some phase. She's pretty enough, I suppose, in that girl next door way, but she'll never fit into our world." Arthur is furious. "Maybe she'll get tired of trying and leave on her own," Sophia said. "Save us all the embarrassment." I stood there in that marble hallway, hand frozen on the bathroom door, feeling my face burn. I should have left that night. I should have told Brandon I'd heard them, that his family would never accept me, that we came from different worlds. Instead, I tried harder. When Brandon proposed 6 months later, I convinced myself that love could bridge any gap. We had a small wedding because my parents couldn't afford anything elaborate, and I refused to let the Thorns pay. It was beautiful in its simplicity. A garden ceremony with 100 guests, most of them my clients who'd become friends. The Thorns sat in the front row looking like they were attending a funeral. The marriage started well enough. We moved into a house in Wicker Park that I'd bought with my business earnings. Brandon was proud of that, he said, that his wife was successful enough to buy property in Chicago. I should have questioned why he was proud of my money but never contributed to it. His career flourished. He made senior associate, then junior partner. He worked 70-hour weeks, traveled for clients, networked constantly. I told myself this was temporary, that once he made full partner, things would calm down. Then he decided to get his MBA. Ellie, I need this, he said. If I want to make senior partner, if I want to compete with the legacy associates, I need more credentials. The program's expensive, but think of it as an investment in our future. How much, I asked. $53,000 a year for 3 years. But I'll be working full-time too, so we won't lose my salary. $160,000. My stomach dropped. Brandon, that's more than most people make in 3 years. He took my hands, looked into my eyes with that earnest expression that always worked. I know it's a lot, but think about where we'll be after. Think about the life we can build. I'll make senior partner within 5 years of graduating. We're talking about $1 million salary, Ellie, maybe more. I didn't want $1 million salary. I wanted a partner who came home for dinner. I wanted someone who asked about my day. I wanted to feel like I mattered as much as his career. But I said yes. I always said yes. I paid for it all. Every tuition payment, every textbook, every late-night study session fueled by takeout that I bought on my business credit card. The first semester, I cashed out my retirement savings. The second semester, I took out a business loan. By the third year, I was using profits that should have gone to expanding my business. I did the math once, sitting at my desk at 3 a.m, looking at spreadsheets that made my eyes blur. $143,682 over 3 years, plus opportunity cost, plus the stress, plus the fact that I'd stopped taking a salary to fund his education. Meanwhile, Vance Gatherings grew despite my financial struggles, or maybe because of them. I had to succeed. Failure wasn't an option. I hired more staff. I moved into a proper commercial kitchen with 3 prep stations and 2 industrial ovens. I landed corporate clients, including Morrison Enterprises, which became my biggest account. I started booking weddings for wealthy families, the kind who spent $50,000 on flowers alone. Brandon took credit for the Morrison account. They're a client at my firm, he told people at parties. I connected Ellie with their events coordinator. It was the least I could do to support my wife's little business. It wasn't true. I'd landed Morrison through a referral from another client, but Brandon told the story so often that even I started to half believe it. The cracks in our marriage started showing in year 5. Or maybe they'd always been there and I'd just gotten too tired to pretend I didn't see them. Brandon stopped coming home for dinner. He had client meetings, networking events, firm functions. I'd cook elaborate meals that would sit getting cold on the counter. Eventually, I stopped cooking for us at all. He stopped asking about my business. When I tried to tell him about landing a new client or a successful event, he'd check his phone and say, "That's great, honey," with that distant tone that meant he wasn't listening. He started criticizing everything. The house wasn't clean enough even though I was working 60 hours a week. I wasn't dressing professionally enough for firm events even though I wore the expensive clothes his mother insisted I needed. I wasn't making enough connections even though I was building a successful business from scratch. The worst was when he criticized my cooking at a dinner party with his colleagues. We were at a steakhouse talking about food and someone asked about my catering business. "Ellie makes good food," Brandon said with this condescending laugh. Very down to earth. Comfort food. Not the kind of innovative cuisine you'd find at Alinea or Oriole, but perfectly adequate for corporate lunches and birthday parties. I felt something inside me crack. 7 years of working my ass off of building a business that grossed $400,000 a year, and he called it adequate. But I smiled. I always smiled. I was so good at smiling. Then came the 6th year, and everything started to unravel. Brandon started checking his phone constantly, like obsessively. He'd be in the middle of a conversation and his phone would buzz and his entire attention would shift. He'd smile at the screen, this little private smile, and type quick responses. "Who are you texting?" I'd ask. "Just work stuff. A client. Nothing important." But the way he held his phone angled away from me told a different story. He started taking calls on the back patio, I'd hear his voice through the window low and intimate, hear him laughing in a way he hadn't laughed with me in years. There were late nights at the office that felt suspicious, business trips that seemed unnecessary, receipts for restaurants in his pocket from nights he'd said he was working late. I pushed down the suspicion. I was being paranoid. Brandon wouldn't cheat. He was stressed about work, about the partner decision coming up. I was reading too much into innocent behavior. But my gut knew. Women's intuition isn't magic. It's pattern recognition. It's noticing the 1,000 tiny inconsistencies that don't quite add up. The partner decision was supposed to happen in December, 6 months away. Brandon became increasingly obsessed with it, increasingly distant. He spent every weekend at the office. He stopped sleeping in our bed, claiming he didn't want to wake me when he came home late. He slept in the guest room more often than not. We hadn't had sex in 4 months. When I tried to initiate, he'd claim he was too tired, too stressed, not in the mood. The rejection stung every time, but I told myself it was temporary. Once he made partner, everything would go back to normal. Except nothing was normal. Nothing had been normal for a long time. Then 6 weeks before the dinner that changed everything, his behavior escalated. I came home from a wedding I'd catered in Oak Park to find Brandon in his office door closed, talking on the phone. I heard him laugh, then say in this tender voice I barely recognized, "I miss you too. I can't wait until we can do this properly." My hand froze on the doorknob. Who was he talking to? I walked away before he could know I'd heard. I went upstairs, sat on our bed, and felt my entire body shake. This was real. This wasn't paranoia or insecurity. My husband was having an affair. I should have confronted him then. I should have demanded the truth. But I was scared. Scared of the answer. Scared of what it would mean. Scared that if I forced the issue, I'd lose everything I'd built my life around. So I did what I'd been doing for 7 years. I stayed quiet and kept working and hoped that I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I was loading my car after a corporate event downtown when I saw them. Brandon and a woman I didn't recognize standing outside a hotel in the Loop. They weren't touching, but the body language was unmistakable. The way they stood close, the way she looked up at him, the way he smiled down at her. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching my husband with another woman. She was beautiful. Tall, blonde, professional-looking in an expensive suit, the kind of woman who'd fit perfectly into his world. They talked for a few minutes, then she touched his arm and walked into the hotel. Brandon watched her go, then checked his phone and smiled. I drove home and threw up in the bathroom. Then I sat on the cold tile floor and cried until my ribs ached. But I still didn't confront him, because confronting him meant everything would change, and I wasn't ready for that change. I was still holding on to the fantasy that we could fix this, that the man I'd married was still in there somewhere. 2 weeks before the dinner, things got worse. I needed to use Brandon's laptop because mine had died and I had a proposal due. He was in the shower. His laptop was sitting open on the bed. I sat down, opened Chrome, and saw his Gmail already logged in. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But my finger moved to his inbox before I could stop myself. The emails were all right there. He hadn't even tried to hide them. From Harrison and Associates Law Firm, R.E. Divorce Consultation. The subject line made my blood run cold. I opened it with shaking hands. Mr. Thorne, thank you for meeting with me yesterday to discuss your situation. As discussed, Illinois is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets will be divided fairly but not necessarily equally. Given that your wife's business Vance Gatherings increased significantly in value during your marriage, we have strong grounds to argue for a substantial portion of the business valuation despite her claims that she built it pre-marriage. I recommend we move forward with the following strategy. 1. Document any financial contributions you made to the household during the business growth period. 2. Gather evidence of your networking that led to client acquisition. 3. Consider timing the filing for after your partner promotion finalizes, as this will strengthen your financial position. Based on current valuation, we estimate Vance Gatherings is worth approximately $1.2 million. In a contested divorce, we could reasonably expect to secure 40 to 50% of business assets plus division of real property and savings. My retainer is $50,000 for a case of this complexity. Please advise on how you'd like to proceed. I couldn't breathe. My vision went spotty. I read it again, then again, trying to make the words mean something different than what they clearly meant. My husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning to leave me and take my business, the business I'd built with my own hands before I even met him. He was going to destroy me. I scrolled through more emails, months of correspondence. The first one was dated 8 months ago, shortly after he'd started his MBA final year. He'd been planning this for almost a year. There were emails discussing asset hiding strategies, emails about timing the divorce to maximize his payout, emails suggesting ways to make me look like an incompetent business owner so a judge would believe he'd contributed to the success. I found a separate folder labeled Legal Strategy. Inside were financial documents, spreadsheets analyzing my business, client lists, revenue reports. He'd been systematically stealing my business information, preparing for war. Then I found the emails to her, to Vanessa as he'd saved her contact, except at the bottom of one email she'd signed off with her full name, Valerie Sterling, the blonde woman from the hotel. My darling Val, I can't stop thinking about last weekend. Being with you reminded me what it feels like to be truly happy. Ellie has always been so focused on her work, so unwilling to fit into my life properly. She doesn't understand the pressure I'm under, the world I navigate. You get it. You've always gotten it. Harrison says we need to wait until December, until after the partnership decision. I hate every day I have to pretend, but it won't be much longer. By this time next year, we'll be together properly. No more hiding. No more pretending. Just us. I'm handling the Ellie situation carefully. She has no idea what's coming. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late for her to protect her assets. Her business is worth enough that we'll have a very comfortable start to our life together. I love you, always have, always will. Brandon, the Ellie situation, that's what I was to him. A problem to be managed, an obstacle to be removed. I sat there with his laptop for over an hour, reading every email, every text he'd backed up, every document in his legal strategy folder. I learned that Valerie was his college girlfriend, the one his family had loved. I learned that they'd reconnected at his 10-year law school reunion 18 months ago. I learned that she was also a lawyer, also married, also planning to leave her husband once Brandon secured his partnership. I learned that this had all been a long con, that maybe it had always been a con from the very beginning. When I heard the shower turn off, I closed the laptop, went downstairs, and started cooking dinner with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Brandon came down 20 minutes later, kissed my cheek like a dutiful husband, asked what I was making in that distracted tone that meant he didn't really care. Chicken parmesan, I said. Your favorite. Great, he said, already looking at his phone. I might need to eat quickly. Conference call at 8. Of course, I said. We ate in silence. He typed on his phone between bites. I watched him and tried to see the man I'd married, but all I could see was a stranger, a criminal. A thief planning to rob me of everything I'd built. After dinner, he went to his office. I went upstairs and cried into my pillow, trying to be quiet so he wouldn't hear. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 7 years. Then I drove to Diane Lawson's office. Diane had a reputation. She was known as the most ruthless divorce attorney in Chicago, the one you hired when you wanted blood. She was expensive as hell. Her retainer alone was $30,000. But I'd heard the stories. She'd destroyed cheating spouses. She'd protected her clients' assets like a pit bull guarding a bone. She didn't do friendly divorces or mediation. She went for the throat. I needed someone who would go for the throat. Her office was in the Loop on the 42nd floor of a glass tower. The receptionist took one look at my face and said, "Mrs. Vance, Ms. Lawson is expecting you. Right this way?" Diane's office was all glass and steel and terrifying competence. She was in her 50s, beautiful in a severe way, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. She stood when I entered, shook my hand with a grip that could crush bone. "Tell me everything," she said. "Don't leave anything out." I talked for 2 hours straight. I showed her screenshots I'd taken of Brandon's emails on my phone. I showed her the divorce strategy folder. I showed her the correspondence with Valerie. I told her about the 7 years of marriage, the money I'd spent on his education, his family's contempt, the affair, everything. Diane listened with laser focus, taking notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking sharp, specific questions. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me with something like respect. "You're in a complicated position," she said. "Brandon's strategy is actually quite sophisticated. Your business did increase significantly in value during your marriage. Illinois law could potentially award him a portion of that increase regardless of your pre-marriage ownership." My stomach dropped. So he could actually take my business. Not if we're smarter than his lawyers, Diane said. And we will be. First thing we need to do is establish that Brandon made no meaningful contributions to Vance Gatherings. No networking that led to clients, no financial investment, no sweat equity. We need to prove your business growth was entirely independent of the marriage. I can do that, I said. He never helped. He actively made things harder. Good. Second, we need to address the fraud, the asset information he stole from you, the strategy to make you look incompetent. That's not just divorce tactics. That's potential criminal behavior. Can we use that? We can definitely use that, Diane said with a cold smile. Third, we need to secure your assets immediately. Do you have a joint bank account? Yes. Joint savings, joint checking. I need you to document every dollar you contributed to those accounts. Then legally, you can withdraw your contributions and move them to a separate account. We do this before he files while you still have access. My heart was pounding. This felt real suddenly, like I was actually going to fight back. What about the affair, I asked. Does that matter? Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, so adultery doesn't affect asset division. But it absolutely affects public opinion, professional reputation, and negotiating leverage. If Valerie Sterling is also a lawyer, if she's also married, this could get very messy for both of them very quickly. I want it messy, I heard myself say. I want them to face consequences. Diane's smile was terrifying and wonderful. Then we're going to get along very well. My retainer is $30,000. Are you able to pay that today? I pulled out my checkbook and wrote the check without hesitation. It was a huge amount of money. It was also the best investment I'd ever made. We spent another hour going over strategy. Document everything. Secure my assets. Don't let Brandon know I suspected anything. Act normal. Keep him confident and comfortable while we built our case. The hardest part would be the acting. Continuing to smile at him, to sleep next to him, to pretend our marriage was just going through a rough patch while I knew he was plotting my destruction. But I could do it. I'd been performing for the Thorns for 7 years. I could perform a little longer. That afternoon, I met with Walter Davies, my accountant. Walter was in his 60s, meticulous to the point of obsession, and had been doing my business books since the beginning. I trusted him completely. We met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, away from both our offices. I told him I needed to review every financial transaction involving Brandon and my business over the past 7 years. His face fell. Oh, Ellie, did he do something? I need to know if he ever contributed financially to Vance Gatherings, I said, avoiding the question. Even indirectly. Did he ever make investments? Give loans, pay for equipment or supplies? Walter pulled out his laptop and we spent the next 3 hours going through every record. It was tedious, exhausting work. But the conclusion was clear. Brandon had never put a single dollar into my business, not one. In fact, the money flow had gone entirely the other way. I'd subsidized our household expenses so Brandon could pursue his career and education. I'd paid for his suits, his professional memberships, his networking dinners. Over 7 years, I'd contributed approximately $230,000 more to our household than he had. But Walter said carefully, "There's something else you should know. Brandon contacted me about 3 weeks ago." My blood went cold. About what? He said he wanted to understand your business better. Said he was thinking about investing, wanted to help you grow. He asked about valuation ownership structure, client acquisition profit margins. What did you tell him? I gave him general information, nothing I wouldn't share with a potential investor. But, Ellie, he asked some strange questions. He wanted to know if there were any irregularities in your books, any transactions that might look questionable to an auditor. I felt sick. He's trying to make me look incompetent. He wants evidence that I'm not managing my business properly so he can justify taking it. Walter's face hardened. Over my dead body. Your books are cleaner than most businesses 10 times your size. You've never missed a tax payment, never fudged a number, never cut a corner. I'll testify to that in court if I need to. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. That means everything. Walter hesitated. There's more. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now it makes sense. Brandon asked me to generate some reports for him. Revenue by client expense categories, that kind of thing. I gave them to him because he was your husband and said he wanted to help. But Ellie, those reports would be very useful to someone planning a divorce. He played you, I said. He played all of us. Walter looked genuinely upset. I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. You couldn't have known, I said. He's very good at pretending to be something he's not. After meeting with Walter, I drove straight to my bank. I sat down with the branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd helped me get my first business loan. I need to see all applications and pending transactions on my accounts, I said. Personal and business. Patricia pulled up my files. Her expression shifted from professional to concerned as she scrolled through the records. Ellie, did you authorize a home equity line of credit application on your property? No, I said, but I wasn't surprised. How much? $200,000. It's scheduled to be finalized next Tuesday. I need to cancel it immediately, and I need to know if there's anything else I don't know about. We spent an hour going through every detail of my accounts. Brandon had been busy. He'd attempted to add himself as a co-owner on my business account, claiming it was for estate planning purposes. The bank had flagged it for my approval, but I'd been so busy I hadn't checked my mail. He'd also opened a credit card in both our names without telling me, charged $15,000 on it, and been making minimum payments from our joint account. The theft was worse than I'd thought. It wasn't just planning for future assets. He'd already been stealing from me. I canceled the HELOC application. I froze the joint credit card. I went to my joint savings account and transferred exactly half $53,000 into a new personal account. It was my money. I'd deposited almost all of it, but I took only half to stay legally clean. Then I drove home, my mind racing with rage and hurt, and a cold determination to make him pay for every lie, every betrayal, every stolen dollar. Brandon came home late that night after 11. He found me in the kitchen, supposedly working on recipes for an upcoming event. Hey, he said, kissing the top of my head like we were still a normal couple. Long day. Me too, I said with a smile that felt like glass cutting my face. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, loosened his tie. I'm going to work in my office for a bit. Don't wait up. Okay, I said, Brandon. Yeah? I love you, I said, testing him. He didn't even turn around. Love you too. The words meant nothing. They were just sounds, empty and meaningless as the 7 years we'd spent together. After he went to his office, I took out my phone. I'd spent the afternoon researching audio recording laws in Illinois. It was a two-party consent state, which meant recording someone without permission was illegal. But there were exceptions for protecting yourself from illegal activity. I wasn't going to rely on those exceptions. Instead, I bought 3 tiny audio recorders online, the kind that looked like USB drives. I'd place them strategically around the house and record everything. If I couldn't use the recordings in court, fine, but I needed to know the full extent of his planning. I needed to understand who I was really fighting. The recorders arrived 2 days later. I placed one in his office tucked behind a row of books, one in the living room inside a decorative bowl, one in the kitchen on top of the refrigerator where he'd never look. Then I waited. The first night, I got nothing useful. Just Brandon on work calls, boring legal discussions. The second night, more of the same. But the third night, I hit gold. I was upstairs supposedly reading. Brandon was in his office with the door closed. I'd synced the audio recorders to an app on my phone so I could listen in real time. His phone rang. I heard him answer. Hey, beautiful, he said in a voice I didn't recognize. It was warm, tender, intimate. A voice he used to use with me, maybe? A voice I hadn't heard in years. Valerie must have said something because he laughed. I know I miss you too. This is torture. But we're so close now, just a few more months. A pause while she talked. No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's completely clueless. She's too busy with her little business to notice what's happening right under her nose. The contempt in his voice made me want to throw up. The partner decision is next month. Harrison says once that's finalized, we can move forward with filing. The timing has to be perfect so she can't claim I'm taking money I don't deserve. Another pause. Of course I'm sure. Ellie's been a useful stepping stone, but that's all she ever was. My family was right from the beginning. She was never good enough. She doesn't fit in our world. You do, Val. You've always been the one. I had to press my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. I love you too, he said. I'll text you tomorrow. We'll plan our next meeting. And Val, thank you for being patient. I know this isn't easy for you either, sneaking around Mark. But soon we won't have to hide. Soon we'll have everything we want. He hung up. I sat there on our bed listening to him shuffle papers in his office, humming to himself like he didn't have a care in the world. He'd called me a stepping stone. My family was right from the beginning. She was never good enough. 7 years of my life. 7 years of loving him, supporting him, believing in us. And I was just a stepping stone, a useful tool to be discarded when he didn't need me anymore. Something inside me turned to ice. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was cold and calculated and ready for war. The next day, I met with Leo for coffee. He'd texted me out of nowhere, said he needed to talk to me about something important. We met at a cafe in Evanston neutral territory. Leo looked terrible. Tired, stressed, like he hadn't slept in days. He ordered coffee and a sandwich he didn't touch. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and you're going to hate me for not telling you sooner. But I can't keep lying to you." "Okay," I said carefully. "Brandon's having an affair with Valerie Sterling, his college girlfriend. My parents loved her, wanted them to get married back then. They broke up and Brandon dated other people, met you, but they reconnected at his law school reunion last year." "I know," I said quietly. Leo's eyes widened. "You know, I've known for about a week. I found the emails. I know everything." He looked relieved and guilty at the same time. "I saw them together at our family's lake house in Wisconsin 4 months ago. I didn't know what to do. Brandon's my brother, but what he's doing is wrong. It's so wrong." "It's worse than you know," I said. "He's planning to divorce me and take half my business. He's been strategizing with a divorce lawyer for 8 months. He's been stealing my financial information to build a case against me." Leo looked like I'd punched him. "Oh my God, Ellie, I'm so sorry. I knew he was cheating, but I didn't know about the rest. Does your family know?" He hesitated. "Mom and Dad know about the divorce planning. I heard them talking about it last month. Dad told Brandon to wait until after his partnership so he'd be in a stronger financial position. Sophia knows everything. She's been helping him." "Of course she has," I said bitterly. "But Ellie, they don't know about Valerie being married. That part would be a problem even for them. The Thorns care about appearances above everything. If it got out that Brandon was having an affair with a married woman, that he was planning to break up 2 marriages to be together, it would be a scandal. Dad would be furious." Something clicked in my mind, a strategy forming. "Leo, I need to ask you something. Would you be willing to testify about what you know, about what you've heard and seen?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely. What Brandon's doing is wrong. You don't deserve this. You've been nothing but kind to me, to all of us, even when we treated you like dirt. I'll help you however I can." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you. That means more than you know." We talked for another hour. Leo told me details I didn't know. How Arthur and Harriet had never wanted Brandon to marry me. How they'd been pressuring him to divorce me for years. How Sophia had actively encouraged the affair with Valerie, seeing it as a way to get rid of me and restore Brandon to what they considered an appropriate social standing. The Thorns weren't just cold. They were cruel, and they'd been conspiring against me from the beginning. After leaving Leo, I sat in my car and made a decision. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to destroy them, all of them. I was going to make them pay for 7 years of condescension and contempt, for treating me like I was beneath them while taking my money and my labor, for plotting to steal everything I'd built. I called Brandon from the parking lot, my voice shaking with manufactured panic. "Brandon, I need you. Something terrible happened with Morrison Enterprises. They're threatening to pull their contract. If I lose them, I could lose everything. All the work we've done, all the sacrifices we've made. I need your family's help. Your dad knows business. Maybe he can help me figure out how to save this." There was a pause. I knew he had plans that evening with Valerie, but this was too good an opportunity. His wife's business failing his family present to witness it, setting him up for an even better divorce settlement. "Of course," he said, concern dripping from his voice. "Don't worry. I'll call everyone right now. We'll figure this out together. Family sticks together, right?" "Right," I said, hating every word. "Thank you." I spent the next day preparing. I knew this was my one shot. I had to do this perfectly or risk losing everything. I compiled every piece of evidence onto a tablet. The emails between Brandon and his lawyer, the texts between Brandon and Valerie, the financial records showing his theft, the audio recordings of his phone calls, Walter's testimony about Brandon's attempt to access my business information, the canceled HELOC application, everything. I made backup copies on 3 different USB drives. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server. I emailed copies to Diane Lawson with instructions to release them if anything happened to me. I practiced what I was going to say. I rehearsed staying calm. I prepared for every possible reaction. Chloe came over that morning to help me set up. She was my business partner, my best friend, the person who'd been with me since the beginning. She knew what was happening, and she was furious on my behalf. "You're going to destroy him," she said with fierce satisfaction. "Make him pay for every lie, every betrayal. Show them all who you really are." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Good," she said. "Channel that fear into rage. You've earned this moment. Take it." I spent hours cooking, even though I knew no one would eat. It was therapeutic, focusing on something I could control. Rack of lamb with herb crust, roasted vegetables with balsamic reduction, a salad with pears and goat cheese, homemade tiramisu. I set the table with our good china. I put the folder of evidence on the chair next to mine, covered with a napkin. I set up my tablet to connect to our smart TV. I put my phone on silent and tucked it in my pocket. Then I got dressed. Black suit Brandon had once told me made me look the most professional. Pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a neat bun. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked strong, determined, dangerous. Brandon came home at 6 an hour before his family was due to arrive. He looked stressed, distracted. "You okay?" he asked, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. "Better now that you're home," I lied. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's last minute." "Of course," he said. "That's what family does. We support each other." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The Thorns arrived at 7 sharp. Arthur in another expensive suit checking his Rolex before he even stepped through the door. Harriet in designer everything immediately scanning my home for flaws. Sophia looking bored, texting someone, probably her husband, telling him she was stuck at another Ellie emergency. Leo last, his eyes meeting mine with an apology and encouragement. They sat at my dining room table like a tribunal. Brandon at one end playing concerned husband. I sat at the other end, the folder next to my plate, the tablet in my lap. "Can I get anyone drinks?" I asked the perfect hostess. Arthur waved his hand dismissively. "Let's just get to business. Brandon says you're having problems with a major client." I stood up, glass in hand. "Before we discuss that, I want to make a toast. To family, to loyalty, and to finally seeing things clearly." Everyone raised their glasses, confused but polite. I saw Leo's hand shake slightly. I sat down and pulled out my tablet. "Now about this business emergency. The truth is, there's no crisis with Morrison Enterprises. They renewed their contract for another 2 years last month. The real crisis is my marriage." The table went silent, Brandon's face drained of color. I pressed play on the first audio file. Sophia's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "I can't believe you actually married the help. Dad's right, you need to divorce her before there are kids and you're stuck forever." Brandon's response followed. "I'm working on it. My lawyer says we can get half her business too." Sophia turned white. Harriet's hand flew to her throat. Arthur's face went red. Leo closed his eyes. Brandon sat frozen, his mouth open. I let the recording finish, let the silence stretch unbearably. "So I said conversationally, as it turns out, there is a crisis. Just not the one I told you about." I connected the tablet to the TV. Screenshots of emails between Brandon and his divorce attorney filled the screen. Strategy documents, asset division plans, timelines for destroying me. 8 months. "Brandon," I said, my voice cold, "you've been planning this for 8 months, while I paid for your MBA, while I supported your career, while I believed we were partners." I turned to Arthur and Harriet. "Did you know about the affair? Or just about the divorce plan, because Leo was kind enough to fill me in on some family discussions you all thought I'd never hear about?" Arthur started to stand. "This is outrageous. I won't sit here and be accused." "Sit down, Arthur," I said quietly. "I'm not done." The authority in my voice surprised even me. He sat. I brought up the financial documents next. The spreadsheet showing every dollar I'd spent on Brandon's education. The bank statements showing the secret account with my stolen money. The canceled HELOC application. $143,682, I said. "That's what I invested in Brandon's education, plus another $200,000 in household expenses I covered so he could focus on his career. He's been systematically stealing from me for months, draining our accounts, trying to take out loans on my property by forging my signature." Brandon found his voice weak and desperate. "Ellie, please. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." Can you explain, Valerie? I asked, pulling up the text messages on the screen. The room exploded. Harriet gasped. Sophia cursed. Arthur's face went from red to purple. I read some of the messages aloud, my voice steady. Being with you reminded me what it feels like to be truly happy. Ellie has always been so focused on her work, so unwilling to fit into my life properly. I looked around the table. 6 months of an affair. Detailed plans for our future together. Complaints about me, how I'm not good enough for your family, how I'm just a stepping stone. I played the audio of his phone call with Valerie, the one where he called me clueless and said I'd always been beneath him. Harriet looked genuinely shaken. Sophia was trying to delete something on her phone. The messages you're deleting, Sophia, I said. The ones where you helped Brandon plan his strategy. I already have copies. I have everything. She stopped moving entirely. Brandon tried to cry. His eyes filled with manufactured tears. Ellie, I was confused, unhappy. We've grown apart over the years. These things happen. I laughed a harsh sound that didn't sound like me at all. Grown apart. Is that what you call planning to steal my business and leave me for your college girlfriend? Then I played my final card. And did you tell your family that Valerie is married? The room went completely silent. You could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Her husband's name is Mark Sterling, I continued. Venture capitalist, worth about $30 million. He had no idea about the affair until I had coffee with him yesterday and showed him all the evidence. Brandon stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. What did you do? We had a lovely talk, actually, I said calmly. He was very grateful for the information. Apparently, he'd had suspicions but no proof. He's filing for divorce, and he's very interested in making sure both you and Valerie face professional consequences. Something about using company resources for personal affairs, hotel rooms booked on firm credit cards. His lawyers are very thorough. Arthur finally exploded. He lunged across the table, scattering plates and glasses. Food and wine went everywhere. 7 years of carefully prepared dinner destroyed in seconds. You think you've won? He screamed, being held back by Leo and Sophia's husband. You're nothing. You work with your hands because you're not smart enough for a real career. My son made a mistake getting involved with you. I stood there calmly watching this powerful man lose control completely. I may work with my hands, Arthur, but at least I built something real. What have you built besides a family of liars and thieves? He tried to lunge again. I walked to the door and opened it. I think you all need to leave now. Harriet grabbed her purse, her composure shattered. Sophia wouldn't look at me. Arthur was still screaming threats about lawyers and lawsuits and destroying me. Only Leo stopped on his way out. His eyes were wet. I'm sorry, Ellie. You deserved so much better than this family gave you. Thank you for being honest with me, I said. Good luck with the architecture program. I meant what I said about supporting your dreams. Brandon was the last one at the door. Where will you go? He asked, his voice small. I have a hotel room booked. I'll be back tomorrow while you're at work to get my things. He finally understood. You planned this whole thing. I learned from the best, I said. His face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. My father wasn't kidding about the lawyers. We'll destroy you. I closed the door without answering. That night, I sat in a clean hotel room with just my laptop, my dog Buster, and the most profound sense of peace I'd felt in 7 years. No more pretending. No more lies. No more being less than I was to make other people comfortable. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I went back to the house. Brandon was at work, or maybe hiding at his parents' house. The dining room was still destroyed from Arthur's rage. Broken china everywhere, wine stains on the carpet, food ground into the floor. I didn't clean it. Not my mess anymore, not my problem. I took only what was mine. My clothes, my books, photos of my family, my grandmother's jewelry, Buster's things, the coffee maker I'd brought into the marriage. I left everything Brandon had given me. The designer bags, the expensive jewelry, the art his mother had insisted we hang. I left my key on the kitchen counter next to a note with just one line, all future communication through attorneys. I moved into a small apartment in Ukrainian Village near my commercial kitchen. It was tiny, maybe 650 square feet with old hardwood floors and a kitchen smaller than my office. The furniture was Craigslist finds and IKEA. The walls needed paint. The bathroom had that old Chicago apartment charm, which meant the tiles were original from 1960. But it was mine. Completely, totally, absolutely mine. No one else's name on the lease, no shared anything. Just me and Buster in the quiet. For 2 days, I turned off my phone. I walked Buster through Humboldt Park. I cooked simple meals for one. I slept without nightmares. I sat on my ancient couch and felt truly free for the first time since I'd said I do 7 years ago. On the 3rd day, I turned my phone back on. 73 messages from Brandon. I read through them, watching his emotional journey from rage to desperation to false apologies to threats and back to desperation. The first few, "How could you humiliate me in front of my family? You've destroyed everything. My father is threatening to cut me off." Then, "Please, Ellie, we can fix this." It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. "I never stopped loving you." Then, "You're making a huge mistake. You'll never find anyone better than me. No one else will want you." Finally, I told Valerie everything. She says she understands. She still wants to be together. An hour later, Valerie just called to break up. She's trying to save her marriage. Mark is threatening to expose her affair to her firm's ethics board. Her partnership is at risk. "This is all your fault, Ellie. You've ruined both our lives." I typed one message: "Divorce papers will be delivered to your office today." He called immediately. I declined. He texted, "Ellie, please, we need to talk. We can work through this." I blocked his number. Diane called that afternoon. "Mark Sterling contacted me. He wants to coordinate our efforts. His investigators discovered Brandon and Valerie have been using firm resources for their affair. Hotel rooms charged to company accounts under fake conference names. Business trips that were actually romantic getaways. His attorneys are building a case for professional misconduct. He wants to make sure they both face consequences." "Good," I said. "Let them burn together." "There's more," Diane continued. "Mark has serious connections in Chicago's legal community. He's making noise about reporting both Brandon and Valerie to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission for ethical violations. Using firm resources for personal affairs, lying about business expenses, potential fraud. Brandon could be looking at more than just divorce. He could be disbarred." The news should have made me happy. Instead, I just felt tired. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. I wanted to be done with all of them. "Do what you need to do to protect me and my business," I told Diane. "But I don't need to destroy him. He's doing that perfectly well himself." Over the next few days, I focused on my business. I threw myself into work with renewed energy. Without Brandon's constant criticism and demands, without the exhausting performance of being the perfect Thorne daughter-in-law, I had so much more mental space for creativity and strategy. I landed 2 new corporate clients within a week. I promoted Chloe to full partner. We started planning an expansion, maybe a second location, maybe a small restaurant. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chin, who specialized in narcissistic abuse and financial exploitation. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just a bad marriage. It was systematic manipulation and financial abuse. She helped me see that I'd been trauma bonded, that I'd stayed so long not because I was weak, but because I'd been expertly controlled. I joined a support group for people divorcing from narcissists. Hearing other people's stories, realizing I wasn't alone, was incredibly healing. There was something powerful about sitting in a circle of strangers who all understood exactly what it felt like to be gaslit, manipulated, and made to feel crazy for noticing the truth. Leo texted me updates, occasionally checking in, making sure I was okay. "Brandon's living with Mom and Dad. It's a disaster. He's drinking too much, missing work. Dad's furious about the scandal. Mom keeps asking what really happened, like she's starting to see through his victim act." Another text a week later. "I told them I'm quitting the business program. I'm enrolling in architecture school like I've always wanted. Watching you stand up to them gave me courage to stand up for myself. Thank you." I texted back, "Proud of you, Leo. Build beautiful things." Mark Sterling's attorney contacted Diane with an interesting proposal. Mark had done a deep dive into Brandon's and Valerie's finances. They'd been planning quite a life together. Joint bank account, real estate shopping. They'd even put a deposit on a condo in River North, assuming both divorces would go smoothly and they'd be living together within the year. Mark wanted to coordinate on exposing everything. His strategy was scorched earth. He wanted them both to lose their jobs, their reputations, everything. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted that, wanted them to suffer the way I'd suffered. But another part of me, the part that was starting to heal, knew that revenge wouldn't make me feel better. It would just keep me tied to them to that toxic period of my life. Tell Mark I appreciate the coordination, but I just want my divorce finalized and my business protected, I told Diane. He can do whatever he wants with his own situation, but I'm not interested in public revenge. I want to move forward, not stay stuck in anger. Diane was quiet for a moment. That's probably the healthiest thing I've heard a client say in 20 years of doing this work. Are you sure? Because we could make him pay in ways beyond the divorce settlement. I'm sure I said, the best revenge is living well. I want to focus on my life, my business, my future. Brandon and the Thorns already took 7 years from me. I'm not giving them any more of my time or energy. The divorce proceedings took 4 months. Brandon's attorney tried every trick. They claimed I'd hidden assets. They claimed Brandon had contributed significantly to my business through networking and social capital. They tried to argue that his Thorn family name had helped my business grow. Diane destroyed every argument with documentation. Walter testified about the complete separation between Brandon and my business finances. I provided detailed records of every client acquisition, proving none came through Brandon's connections. Leo testified about conversations he'd overheard regarding the family's plan to destroy me. The judge was not impressed with Brandon's case, especially after evidence of the affair, the stolen financial information, and the attempted loan fraud came out. In the end, Brandon got exactly what he deserved, nothing. The judge ruled that Vance Gatherings was entirely my separate property. Brandon had made no meaningful contributions to its growth and had actively attempted to defraud me. He got half of our joint savings, which amounted to about $30,000 since I'd already withdrawn my contributions. He got none of the house since it was my premarital property. He got none of my business. He got nothing. The judge also ordered him to pay my attorney fees as punishment for his fraudulent behavior. Diane's bill was substantial. Brandon had to liquidate his investment accounts to pay it. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in March, 6 months after that terrible dinner. I sat in the courtroom, signed the papers, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. When I walked out of that courthouse, I wasn't Brandon Thorne's wife anymore. I was just Eleanor Vance, business owner, survivor, free woman. Brandon's firm quietly asked him to resign 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The scandal of the affair, the ethics questions, the financial impropriety had made him a liability. He took a position at a much smaller firm for a fraction of his previous salary. Valerie lost her partnership track when Mark exposed the affair and the misuse of company resources. She wasn't fired, but she'd never make partner now. Her reputation in Chicago legal circles was destroyed. Mark divorced her and took his considerable wealth with him. Arthur Thorne threatened lawsuits but never followed through once his own attorneys reviewed all my evidence and explained how badly he'd lose. I never heard from Harriet or Sophia again, which was fine by me. Life moved on. The weeks turned into months. Spring came to Chicago, then summer. My business continued to grow. I hired 3 more people. I catered events for clients who actually respected my work. I made enough money to move into a bigger apartment with a real kitchen. I started dating again slowly, carefully. Nothing serious. Just learning what it felt like to be valued, to have someone listen when I talked, to be treated like an equal instead of a burden. I saw Brandon once about 6 months after the divorce. I was at a coffee shop in the Loop meeting with a potential client. He walked in with his laptop, looked around for a table, and saw me. For a moment, our eyes met. He looked terrible. Older, defeated, small. Nothing like the confident man who'd swept me off my feet at that charity gala. He looked away quickly, pretended he hadn't seen me, and left without ordering. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no sadness. He was just a stranger now. Someone I used to know. Someone who'd taught me hard lessons about trust and self-worth. But he didn't matter anymore. Leo and I still meet for coffee sometimes. He's thriving in architecture school, designing sustainable buildings, dating someone who actually makes him happy. We laugh about how we both escaped the Thorne family prison. We talk about the future instead of dwelling on the past. My parents are proud of me, not because I survived the divorce, but because I stood up for myself. Because I chose self-respect over staying in a comfortable lie. Chloe and I are planning to open a second location of Vance Gatherings in Logan Square. We're in negotiations for a space that would include a small cafe and retail shop. It's ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but I'm done playing small to make other people comfortable. I bought myself a gift 6 months after the divorce. A tattoo on my inner wrist in delicate script built from scratch. A reminder that I've done it before and I can do it again. A reminder that I don't need anyone's family name or money or approval to create something valuable. I have my own hands, my own mind, my own strength. The hard truth is this: sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who will hurt you worst. Sometimes the family you marry into sees you as a threat instead of a gift. Sometimes supporting someone's dreams means sacrificing your own, and that sacrifice will never be appreciated or returned. I learned that love isn't supposed to make you smaller. Real love doesn't require you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's vision. Real partnership means building together, not one person extracting value from the other while giving nothing back. I learned that financial abuse is real and insidious, that someone can steal from you while claiming to love you. That control often masquerades as concern. That manipulation feels like care until you're far enough away to see the pattern. I learned that leaving is harder than staying, but staying costs more in the end. That walking away from a life you've built is terrifying, but living a lie is worse. That sometimes burning bridges is the only way to stop people from crossing over to hurt you again. Most importantly, I learned that I am enough. I was always enough. I didn't need the Thorn name or Brandon's supposed love or anyone's approval to have value. I had value all along. I just needed to stop letting other people convince me otherwise. I built Vance Gatherings once from nothing. I rebuilt my life from nothing too. And this time, I built it on truth, on boundaries, on self-respect, and on the unshakable knowledge that I never need to make myself small for anyone again. The foundation has to be solid, and this time I made sure it's rock solid. So here's my question for you. Have you ever stayed in a situation longer than you should have because you were afraid of what came next? Have you ever ignored the red flags because you wanted so badly to believe in someone? And when you finally walked away from something toxic, what did you find on the other side? Your story matters. Share it in the comments. And if this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe, because I'll be here telling the truth about rebuilding after betrayal, about finding your strength, and about discovering that sometimes the ending you feared becomes the beginning you needed.